Hey, Ali Khan, how you doing?
It's weird. I'm confused. We were talking business before you hit the
Mm.
big red button, and I'm looking at the calendar, and your head was little, my head was little, and we both know we have big heads. So I just moved tabs, and here are our egos. Just
Hey, I was wondering if you meant literally or figuratively, but perhaps both. Yeah.
both. Do you have a bit? I've been known. I've gotten the call out. Like you've got a big head. You have a big
So
head.
I don't think you have a big head. I think you've seen that meme that it's like, every TV show needs a one guy with a head shaped like this and one guy with a head shaped like that, and it's
Uh-huh.
it's banana and an orange, one guy with a banana shaped head and one guy with an orange shaped head. Bert
Uh-huh.
and Ernie,
Uh-huh.
Will
Uh-huh.
Smith
Yeah.
and Carlton Banks.
Yes.
Jerry and George.
Yeah.
There's another example. But yeah, I mean, I get the sense that, I have more of the round head and you have more of the kind of the Will Smith oval
I'm a
head.
banana head.
I think
Interesting.
so. I'm the orange.
Interesting. That could be the hair issue too, because I go the high tight route,
No, I
which
think
gives
you're the
more
oval and I'm
oval.
the orange. But,
Okay. No, well, hey, you know what? That like I always say, it's all about good casting. That's how you
yes.
really get things
Do
done.
you always say that?
Yeah. No, I believe it. You know what? It's something that way back in the day when Cheap Eats was kind of about to happen. I didn't know it. And I'm literally sitting there like going, what am I, and kind of like now, what am I doing with my life? What have I done? A friend of mine said, listen, everything you've done is going to line up and make sense. All these experiences happen for a reason. And I find myself now looking back at a time that was just a job that I needed that I could do, which was to work in 30-second commercial casting, and realize that, yes, studying theater, being around actors, understanding that process, and then even just watching movies and TV going, oh, yeah, this is really good. Like appreciating that one little dynamic. And I think, yeah, it's just something, just a little POV. We all learn things. The things we learn, we pick up along the way. And yeah, I think casting is big. It's big. It's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
I just watched something really. Oh man, we could just get into the What's Dad Watching right now on Substack. Check it
Tell
out.
us, tell us, tell us what you're watching and then we'll get into the meat.
I'll tell you what I watched. It was a massive dud. That's a huge hit, despite it all. The Rip with your boys, with your fellas, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. I don't know. I mean, I'm a sucker for the genre, and I was super into it for the first 20 minutes. I was like, going, this is good. Like I said it out loud, like this is good. The last 20-30 minutes were so god awful. It made Bad Boys look genius. Ironically, the director did one of the latter installments of Bad Boys,
Hmm.
but people like it. So
Yeah,
there's
I heard it wasn't great.
it's
But
awful. I mean, like, dude, it like
But you know
you're
what?
just
It's not for me. It's not the type of thing I'm interested in. I am a comedy and drama guy. I don't really care about heists. I don't really care about action, big fires, superheroes and people hurting each other. I don't. I want people to hurt each other emotionally and then grow and heal and overcome those things. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm just such a sucker for the cop genre. I just
Yeah.
it's what I grew up in the 80s watching. And then the other thing I'm watching that's brilliant is Innocente, which apparently is a series of books, and I think they're limited series, and I think there's multiple. I'm watching the one that takes place in España. A little Spanish, so it's quite nice. I'm actually getting a little education, and it's freaking excellent. We are 3 episodes left. I'm five in on an 8 episode run, but it's excellent. That's feeding my soul.
Okay, so the rip.
Or you know what? Be your own judge. I'm not. You know what? Man, that last 20 minutes of it. Maybe watch the rip just so you could see what I'm talking
And
about.
then just check out. And then just when you see there's 20 minutes left, just turn off the TV. I got it.
Like do the dishes. Maybe even drive away. Come back.
Okay. This is our Big Questions series, where every week this summer we are talking to dads about big questions that our little kids or medium-sized kids or large kids, I don't know, kids always have questions, ask, and we help you answer them because, you don't want to get in that thing where that, freeze where the kid's like, what's the meaning of life? And you're like, or is there a God? Well, or questions like the ones today, like, hey, why does that guy have a cup that says help and change, please? And why is that guy on the street? And he's sleeping on a bench. And what do you say? What are you supposed to say? What is the right thing to do?
Mm.
To say. And so today's big question, Ali Khan, is how to talk to kids about poverty, inequality, and homelessness. Really, just like the easy stuff, low-hanging fruit, no big deal. If we could figure this out, man, we could just really live in that utopia that David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson dreamed about. Was that them? I don't know.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about like one of those like famous British actors that had the Sir in front of their name, but I don't know. Sir Richard
No.
Attenborough. Maybe that was a director. I don't know.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's start. Let's start with I mean, this is heavy stuff, but let's just get into it. I mean, homelessness, how did you grow up learning about homelessness, in Missouri? I mean, seriously, like, I mean, they used to call them bums. I'm serious. I think part of this entire project of this dad podcast and just being dads is unlearning all of this shitty language and assumptions and behaviors and the way we talked about things. And like, yeah, to be homeless was to be like a failure and kind of invisible
That's
and a
true.
punchline and a punching bag of society. And that was what we learned as kids.
Yeah,
And I think you grow up and you learn about empathy and you learn about the failings in our social structure to support, the most vulnerable. And so I guess I'm curious that you as a kid growing up in old St. Louis, what was happening over there? Obviously, very to a very prestigious school. You always had a roof over your head, but did you have any
that's
exposure to
true.
people who did not? Did your parents talk about it? Tell us.
It's really interesting, and I'm gonna zero it in on that term you use, bum, because the way we think of homeless people with a negative perspective, in fact, is very important and does dominate. The anger almost helps justify the ignoring. And I would even argue that the ignoring is what we all end up learning. If you were to ask me point blank right now with Heath, how would he react to it? And he's 14. He's more than halfway through eighth grade, right? He's seen things definitely for sure, and just traveling and whatnot. He's already in the place that a lot of people are, which is like you become numb to it. You don't go, oh my God, what's wrong? You don't look at a person on the street and you're like, what happened? What's wrong? Why you don't have clothes or you need money? What's going on there? And, so there's that component and then there's the anger component. So you asked me how I got to this place, right? Well, let's look at my circumstances. I grew up in a nice suburb area. We were removed from all that stuff. I never had to see or interact with it, except for the occasional times. And this also is reflective of where I grew up, which was a city like St. Louis that is suburb heavy, that is city lacking. It is, and it more so now than ever. Like it's really kind of the anatomy of a failed American city. There's just not a lot. No one lives in the city, really. At least not a lot of the more affluent people. If you can afford to, you leave. Period. Right? If you can get out, you do get out. And so, like, occasionally you go to like a baseball game or something like that, and you park, and then to be blunt, you actually interact with people of color. You know what I mean? For the most part, you're just in these like cushy suburbs, majority white, with the speckling of minorities here and there. And you certainly, would get the feeling, the sense of like, oh wow, we're in a different environment. People are maybe asking for money. There's some panhandling and stuff, but very, very limited. The other exposure I had, and this was wildly different, but you have to keep in mind that my parents did grow up in a country that is famous for extreme poverty in Bangladesh. And the two times I went, I was very young, many, 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 many years ago, but we went to probably what's called the most densest crowded city in the world, which is Dhaka, Bangladesh. And I do remember people on the street, short of a couple limbs, begging. So like there was some very extreme stuff there. But again, it was also like, you know, especially in a place like Dhaka, it's like you learn really well how to do what we do, which is to step right over the person, to ignore it, right? So yeah, you know, it was like out of sight, out of mind. Did not do a lot of charity and whatnot. And then if I had to really unpack it, you know, there are times where I think when I was older where I'd have these conversations about inequality. My dad, I remember bringing this up to Brearley later, but he would retort, charity begins at home. And I remember Brearley, who grew up actually, and part of it was the faith that she grew up in with an Episcopalian church, was very charity minded, like did things to engage in the community, to give back. Through her church, and so she was baffled by that. She goes, "What does that even mean? Charity begins at home." And that's something that she still continues to this day. Yeah, you know, like just really learned early on that it didn't matter, and really like I think my dad, who pretty much ran the ship, set a narrative of like, you know what? I grew up with nothing. No one has an excuse. And I think that was, to a large degree, the immigrant mindset from people who are coming from the continent of Asia pre 1967 Immigration Act. Yeah, it was a dog eat dog scenario that brings you here because you could only come here with postgraduate education, which meant you had to just lock in, as Heath would say. And so a lot of that empathy and understanding of inequality, I think, came to me later as an adult than being raised to have those feelings and feel compelled to engage in anything charitable.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Ollie.
Long, boring answer to go, yeah, I grew up not caring. Okay, short answer. I grew up not caring.
No, yeah, but I think that's why we're here, right? We want our kids to care and we want our kids to kind of understand the nuance and context of it, you know, and I'll be honest, like I'm still kind of grappling with what is the correct way to handle homelessness, inequality, both on a, you know, individual level when you are face to face with a person who's asking you for money, and then just systemically, and you start to kind of feel like this diffusion of responsibility. Well, I can't control. I'm not in government. You know, I'm not super wealthy. What can I really do? And why is it my responsibility to take away from my family to help these people? You know, like it always falls on, that is another thing that I always find hilarious is that, you know, you see these telethons. It's like, give to the ASPCA, you know, like Eric McCormick. Don't you have a lot of money from Will and Grace? Why do I have to give $20 a month to the ASPCA, Will?
First of all,
Like,
what world are you in where you're like, ah, you know, you see these telethons? Yeah, like 32 years ago.
well,
Like,
there's
how are you
commercials. No,
inundated with telethons?
but here's an interesting thing that I want to say before I forget is, you know, so often I think that, you know, we tend to blame the people who are in the situations they are in, you know, whether consciously or not, you know, it's well, they're an addict or, you know, well, they made bad choices or, you know, well, they did bad things. And I think the reason that we see homeless people or unhoused people as a threat is because the narrative, you know, whether anecdotal or not, is that like they're going to hurt you or take something from you or that they have disease or that, you know, all of these kind of associations we have with the things that land you in a condition where you are unhoused. And so then we, you know, that lizard brain of ours that is fearful that they're going to take our wallet or, you know, hurt us in some way, you know, says, you know, this person bad, no home bad. And so we want to escape that, right? And then, of course, you want to protect your children. So you, if you see a person, you shield their eyes and you run across quickly because you don't want to get pickpocketed or hurt, or you just don't want to deal with the hard emotional piece of it, right? But I think that what's so interesting to me about all of it is we probably, you and I both, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this, know someone who was an addict, who, you know, was an alcoholic or a drug addict or a gambling addict or, you know, had a mental illness that precluded them from, you know, having a stable life, but never went without housing. Why is that? Why is that? Well, because they had a supportive network around them, charity begins at home, in their parents, extended family, friends, support that either put them in rehab, paid their rent, let them live with them. I mean, all myriad of situations. And either they got back on their feet or they didn't. Either they were able to become functional again or they didn't. But it didn't matter because they had this, rubber padding, as I think everyone should. And so I think that what's so interesting to me, and this is going to hopefully circle back around, is, rather than being mad at the person who doesn't have a home,
Mm-hmm.
why aren't we mad at the system that hasn't created this infrastructure for people to just have a home? And we're not saying, oh, they deserve millions of dollars and all the riches in the world. Just a home. Just, we had a big snowstorm here in the Northeast, like not to have to die in, negative degree weather, and why don't we have an infrastructure like that? And to your point, I could understand that infrastructure not existing in Bangladesh, but in a country, and I'll speak for myself, in a city where we have, apartment units that go for, I'm seeing a headline, Will Arnett drops $10.2 million for a splashy pad in the West Village. How can that be just a kind of throwaway, blind, news item when I'm sure just yet a block or two away, there is someone who does not have a home and will die on the street in cold weather? And then we will say, well, it's their fault because they did drugs. But we all know someone who did drugs that never went
Yeah.
homeless? And so I guess this is kind of the lens I want to approach this conversation with. This is the way that I am hoping to kind of teach my kids to understand inequality and homelessness and poverty, in that it's not a personal failing, it's a failure of a system, and that it's not, just like it's not that individual's own responsibility. This is where I take real issue with Gary Vee. I think he says a lot of valuable things, but when he's like, stop blaming the president and your parents, and it's like, okay, I mean, Gary, you had advantages too, whether it was a loving home or
Yeah.
I don't know, like, the reason he is where he is not, he is not a superhero, he is not a deity. We all have a certain amount of privilege in certain ways that enable us to be where we are. And then it mixes with our own kind of fortitude and stick-to-itiveness. But this idea, this mythology that whoever is homeless deserves to be homeless, whoever is poor deserves to be poor, whoever is rich deserves to be rich. It's not so dissimilar from like divine right. I remember learning about, like, in European history and growing up, it's like kings said they have a divine right
Mm-hmm.
from the God in the sky that I
Yeah.
am supposed to be king. How is it fucking different from saying they're poor, they're supposed to be poor, they're rich? Maybe we're all supposed to just be allowed to live.
I mean, when you bring up the context of New York City and how some person could have a $10 million, I'm going to assume apartment. Maybe it's a house. Maybe it's a house. Would not be surprised if it was a frickin' apartment. Probably has a gym, a nice gym. But you also have to ask yourself this, like, what is it we built here, right? And you can look at, really, New York City is in the state of New York, which is in this country called of America, right? And America is the, quote, the greatest economy the world has ever seen, and has built wealth like no nation ever has, right? That seems to be the big talking points. I'm not an economist, but I'm gonna throw my dice and say it's probably pretty accurate, right? And then people will say, well, why is America so wealthy? How did we gather all this wealth? And people are like, well, it's America. It's the land of opportunity, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Here's my hot take, Neil. The American dream is dated. It's dated. It's built on an idea, and people love to just stay in the world of, like, our forefathers. I'm like, yeah, well, that was several hundred years ago. Like, the American dream, much like medicine, should be modern. I don't want Civil War Tylenol. I want 2027 Tylenol. I want next year's Tylenol. That's me. Other people may not want it, but I feel like that's the standard we should aspire to. And a lot of people say, like, oh, this sounds like socialism. I'm like, well, I mean, is the alternative like stepping over a dead body because the new Tesla's out? We all can kind of, like, at the same time, there's going to be people who kind of challenge, you know, just the nature of capitalism itself. And, it's weird. It's like, I am not a religious person, but I understand the value of religion when you kind of value something else beyond apparently material things. And yeah, it takes money to help people. And to me, that's a big part of it, is that this problem is not being addressed because we don't value it as something worth our time and really money. Really the money.
Well, and I think you hit on something really good talking about the American dream because, so much again of the American dream is a myth. It is a something that we aspire to, much like America itself, never quite lived up to the values that it purported to want to be. It's like that line in Jerry Maguire, I love him. I love him for the man that he is and that he or that the man he's trying to be and the man that he almost is. Renee Zellweger says of Tom Cruise, and great movie, by the way. That's a good movie, Jerry Maguire. And like America's never, I mean, it was like all men are created equal. Not all men, not those guys on that plantation. And also just men, not women,
Mhm.
and also, oh, well, only landowning men, actually. So this idea that, like, we have this country and this world has constantly lived in a state of inequality. But I think if we're going to face it, we have to be honest about the fact that what's happening today is not so different from what happened, in the days of Carnegie and Rockefeller. I mean, Zuckerberg, Musk, you can talk to any, 30 something guy in the manosphere who will tell you, yeah, he's a fucking genius. Elon's a genius, man. It's like, is he? I mean, if I inherited that much money, I could probably be a genius too and like come up with some stuff or pay people to invent things. Like, I'm not saying that he hasn't put any value into the world, but the idea that like he and only he, again, he's not a deity any more than like Rockefeller was.
Mhm.
If anything, I think like he's kind of a supervillain, which I think he's okay with. I wanted to come back to because I went on the old Google machine. Will Arnett's apartment he bought this month
It's an apartment.
for $10.6 million. It's a condo, Ollie, in the West Village. 1 Morton Street is the address if you want to go visit. It's this 3,700 square foot multi-level townhouse style home.
That is the size of a house in my world. In my
Is
world. I'm not
located
calling
in
it
the
10 million.
same building he and his ex-wife Amy Poehler previously lived back home. The all-cash 4-bedroom deal represents a return to a familiar neighborhood for Arnett. So, 1 Morton Square, $10.6 million, 3,700 square feet, 4 bedrooms. Ready for this? 4.5 bathrooms. Now, we're talking about homelessness. You can't walk in to a coffee shop and use the bathroom if you don't make a purchase. They have the little codes, and you have to kind of, hey, I didn't get a receipt. What's the code? You feel like you're like begging, it's like, I have to poop. I have to pee pee. You're asking another adult for a fucking code. It's so inhumane. Our new mayor is trying to expand bathroom access in this city, which is not a bad thing. And meanwhile, Will Arnett, he's got fucking 4.5 bathrooms. What is he? What? So everyone could be in a separate bathroom at the same time, pooping, while they're kind of texting each other? It's ridiculous, Ollie. Nobody needs that many bathrooms.
I know. He's BoJack Horseman, But yeah, it's pretty crazy. I feel like a lot of people will just kind of jump in and say like socialism, go live somewhere else. It's like I think that we can do better. I think we should aspire to better. I think
People,
that
by the way, who criticize socialism are also the people who have, like, American flag with a blue line in it on the back of their car window. It's like, how do you think the police are paid?
right.
It's a socialist system.
Yeah.
If
Yeah,
you have
I
a
mean,
fire in your house, I saw Gangs of New York. I don't think you want these private fire departments.
no, that was a terrible fire department system. I mean, it made the backdraft people seem non-corrupt. I just feel like ultimately when you want to address these things, it becomes much like what happened because fortunately like in the world we have, right? This is where really a lot of the money is and the power to make meaningful changes, right? And much like police reform, which is obviously a dire thing, just talk to the African American community of what their experience has been like. There are certain things that seem to just not make the medicine go down well. Terms like defund the police. People will be like, "Wow, no, you don't want police." It's like, no, I think we, reform or just, better equity, or just like, can we aspire to solve bigger problems? And to circle it back, I will even say this, like, with, it's a big world, big problems, right? It's the thing is you can be around a person who, is homeless, and, not that you shouldn't give what you can in that moment, but you also think about what's like the bigger impact here. I will tell you, in my experience of dealing with actual folks that are homeless, right? And I really have to choose my words carefully, because we have so many words that are just not empathetic, that are cruel: vagrants, bums, Oscar the Grouch. I mean, we could get into the Chappelle bit right now for a second, can't we? But I remember going to USC, which is in kind of infamously known in South Los Angeles. People called it back in the day, "Oh, you mean the University of South Central?" Like, we've had this habit or this pattern of denigrating low income neighborhoods. What's wrong with that? What is wrong? Like, why is it so bad? I mean, we can accept the fact that there's going to be people who make more money and less money, right? Do we have to just go, "Oh, it's a bad neighborhood," and then everything that carries with it, disproportionately black and brown? Anyways, I digress. I'm at USC, and frankly, I was exposed to things that someone who went to the old country day school had not been exposed to. Within the first or second weekend, I remember having a few alcoholic beverages, walking around the fraternity row area, and a homeless person had asked me for money. And I remember I was like, "Oh, here you go." And he could tell that I was a little inebriated. And I found myself going, "Oh my God, I just gave him $8." Like, whoa, he just kept asking, I kept giving it to him. And I had learned a lesson about, there's a time and a place to give money, and maybe drunk isn't the best time to do it, and to be mindful of that. But I do remember very famously, like, being at a late night, and oh, hey there, ring, hey there, calendar. But I was at a late night taco stand, and there were two guys who were in medical scrubs, and a person who clearly appeared to have a long history of abuse with narcotics was asking them for money. And just for context, because I think it's worth it, everyone there was African American. And I remember the person in the scrubs, I assume a doctor, grabbed his hand to look at his hand, to basically look for the burn marks that come from a butane torch when you're freebasing cocaine or crack cocaine, right? And I remember just, it was like watching theater. I was like, this is wild to me. I'm 19 years old. I'm still very new to this environment. And just literally get an education in the streets right then and there. And it's and you kind of think about all this stuff, like, Heath's seen this stuff, and it's overwhelming, Neil. It's overwhelming, you know,
Sure.
huge problems. And yeah.
Well, and I also want to talk about, and again, I'll talk about New York City because that's where I am, and my kids are in school here, and we are members of the public school system that, near like a million kids in New York are. And I think we so often have this tendency to talk about homelessness as adults, but the truth is there are a lot of unhoused kids. So 154,000 New York City public school students, which is 1 in 7, experienced homelessness this school year. 154,000 kids in this city. That's bananas, right? And so when we talk about talking to our kids about inequality, part of it too is just that, like, their peers, some of them are at the poverty line or below and may not be in full-time housing. Now, obviously, some of that is tied to domestic abuse, trying to escape certain situations, there's a myriad of reasons, right? What I can tell you anecdotally that I've learned as being president of our school board is sometimes what will happen is students who are in temporary housing will be put in one of these like luxury buildings for like a year, and then they're moved. They're like, "Oh, we'll keep you here for a second." And then what happens is they get into this school system, they get into this community, and then they're told, "Okay, leave now." we need this unit for a millionaire, and we'll put you in the Bronx, get out of Brooklyn. Like, that's so messed up, and you're not setting up. I mean, we talk about like, you know, our own kids and like if we have to move, would that traumatize them? I mean, like there is really no care or thought about the emotional impact this has on kids being unhoused or being in temporary housing. So I did just want to bring that up. It's not just something that happens to adults who made bad decisions. And also, I think we've established that it's not something that just happens to people who made bad decisions. It happens to people because there's no support system in place. But, it can happen to anyone at any time. And that's really scary. And like, it's really scary for a kid to think about. It's scary for anyone to think about not having kind of a home. I think it's like one of the basic needs. But I'm curious, we've talked about this before and, it's obviously tied to it, this idea of like class. Matt Bearden really got into it for us, and I thought in a really poetic, wise way. My wife is fond of saying that she was the poorest rich kid, which is to say that she grew up around a lot of wealth, as did
Mm-hmm.
I. But I always kind of had the feeling that like it could get ripped away from us at any moment. And we just kind of like skated through. I lived on the other side of the tracks, literally. There was a train, station. Now, this is North Jersey, Bergen County. And so like it's all relative, but you still feel what it's like when your peers live in these mansions and you do not. When your peers are going on, exotic vacations, several times a year and you are not. And so I'm curious how you talk to Heath about, probably like the massive wealth difference in our country, in your community, in his school. Has that come up? Has he asked questions? Have you offered advice?
And I would say this, as you always say, like I'm a few piano lessons behind. Your kids, Cece and Zeke, are going to really put this all together really, really quickly. And ultimately, they're just going to model behavior because that's really what's happening. And really, it's almost like find the opportunity to say what you want to say about this soon, and also take action. But to get to Heath, yes, I mean, we've crossed this bridge big time. And the thing is like he doesn't need to really ask questions. He literally figured it out. He puts it all together, much like what you're saying. And the thing is like it's not even so much does everyone have the super big house? Is everyone like, oh my God, like that's Matthew McConaughey's kid? But once you have that precedent set, you don't think about the median. You know what I mean? You just see what's out there and you simply go, well, I don't have that. And then it takes more of an adult to really go, listen, I get it. They're both doctors, but you realize doctors and lawyers are no longer the super rich people anymore. And that's a whole other reckoning that we're dealing with now as adults. That literally as adults, you're like, wait, what? There's a whole new world order to this wealth, and we live in a city that has very much represents that new world order because of tech industry here that's really grown, and on top of the fact that Texas is a state that does not charge like corporate tax, and there's no state income tax, so wealthy people will literally choose to flee here, and to a degree, and I think Florida as well, and companies come here. You know what I mean? It's a huge tax incentive for big, huge companies to come here. So, there is a lot of money coming in. He goes to a school that would be considered like one of the most sought after, and a relative bargain compared to LA and New York prices. But still, it's like, yes, this whole thing is built for the wealthy. And the wealthy is like a whole new other level. My God. And it is something that has become, to a degree, I think, something to notice and something to a degree uncomfortable. And also, like, he has friends who aren't of that world as well. Thankfully, because of activities we put him in, and even just friends before that date back from pre-K days, which is kind of crazy. But it's staggering because he'll see those differences, and it simply is what it is. But it's really quite extreme. Just to kind of put you in his shoes, right? This is a school, and there are kids that'll be like, you know what? I swear with private school, so much of it is like they just pack in the days off. You're like, wait, another day off? another one? What's going on? So they'll have like, a random 5-day weekend will pop up where you're like, no one else is having this setup. What's going on here? And literally, like, this was someone in his class. Basically, the family is like, well, they have a 5-day weekend, so we'd love to bring. And this was a different group of people, but call it like 6 kids were all invited to go to Mexico, to go to this private home. And the flight's covered. We can all just take our jet. But we are going to go scuba diving. So if you could take the next 6 to 8 weeks, Neil, for Cece to take scuba diving lessons. It's a 6-week course, and that way the kids will be ready. It's just like, it's a little much. It's a little much. You know what I mean? Because we just have some time. So yeah, it really is a kind of a whole other level, a whole other level. And, frankly, living in LA, chasing a life in the entertainment industry, like just not really around that many people. If I was more successful, maybe I would be around some of these kind of opportunities. But, I was a little more low, as you know.
Hey, listen, it's you get a roof over your head.
For now. Yeah, still in it, still in the fight.
So let's talk about what the research says about all this. The research, Ollie, says that kids notice inequality by age 4 or 5. Kids form beliefs about fairness, deservingness, and why people struggle long before parents think they do, kind of like you were saying. And a core reflection that's come out of a lot of research about this topic is that, as we often say, avoiding the question, avoiding the conversation doesn't protect kids. It teaches them not to talk about suffering and not to talk about difficult things. So that's why we're here. So let's talk about what this topic is and isn't. All right, let's define it clearly so that we know the terms of the conversation. What is poverty? Poverty is a lack of resources, not a lack of effort. What is inequality? Inequality means a difference in access, opportunity, safety, and stability. Let's say that again. Inequality is a difference in access, opportunity, safety, and stability. And what is homelessness? Homelessness is a housing crisis, not a personal failure, which I think is a fascinating way to frame it, because homelessness, like we were saying before, it's not a personal failure. It's a failure of the system to provide adequate amount of homes or tools for having those homes. So homelessness is a housing crisis. So when they talk about the housing crisis, that's what it is. So yeah, those are the definitions of poverty, inequality, and homelessness. And these issues are systemic, which is to say, we all have kind of our own anecdotes and personal experiences, but this is part of a large web of historical and political systems that exist and have existed for generations that create these conditions. They are complex, and wealth and privilege and access are not evenly distributed. It's just a fact. And the other reality of poverty and inequality is they are often tied to health, mental health, physical health, trauma, wages or lack thereof. I think you're more likely to become unhoused if you live paycheck to paycheck rather than have a safety cushion, whether it's from inheriting generational wealth or, your own income. And housing cost as well. Wealth begets wealth. You have enough money, it makes interest for you. You don't have enough money, you are charged, through the nose.
Yeah.
And also, rent. Rent is, I have this book, where is it? It's called Abolish Rent. And it's it's right here, which I'm reading. And it's all about, the idea that no one should go without housing and that no one should have to be paying for someone else's mortgage or someone else's income. So I'll let you know when I finish that, but
Yeah, let me know how it, if you're like, oh, and this is how we fix it. It's, God, it's so amazing. Like, I was just having this conversation with the chef friend the other day, and because she asked me, she goes, how's things going? And we had brought up just a small little aspect, but it just, nothing life or death, but health related, medical costs. You run up one medical bill. She had the same thing too. Just something happened. Something happened, and she had to go to the emergency room. She was sudden pain, and the irony is, it all worked out. It all worked out, but she had to go, sit and be in the bed, get the IV, whatever. And so many of us are one bad day away from just being unhoused. It's so crazy. I think so much of this is kind of pretending it will never happen to us, or when it happens to someone, it's because they deserved it. And no one wants to admit the fact that you're this close away. You're just a couple series of events away from being totally screwed, because there is no safety net for everybody that lives in the country that has the greatest wealth the world has ever seen. And that is really when you scratch your head and go, what are we doing? What are we doing? What's so great? Why, it's just crazy, It's weird. You just kind of can go on and on and on, and people be like, oh, you're being so political and stuff like that. I'm like, we can launch people in space. We can fire rockets around the world. We could remove a freaking president or dictator or wherever you want to call him with a special operation like lightning fast, like it's a movie. We can do that. But we can't figure out how to really end homelessness.
Well, and I think why is that, right? I think you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier. We don't care. Like,
Yeah.
we could. That's the craziest part about this. You every now and again see these, Elon Musk is set to be the first trillionaire. If you took half of his wealth, if you took a tenth of his wealth, you could solve the housing crisis. You could solve, the education gaps. You could solve, a myriad of health and social and emotional issues, infrastructure issues, crumbling bridges. You could solve all of it. But instead, we've fallen into this trap of kind of mythologizing these hero genius boys who, oh my God, they're just so one of a kind. And oh my God, I could be that one day. I think that's the thing too, is they have us buying into this idea that if we just work hard enough, I could be Elon Musk. No, you can't. You cannot. You won't. It's not going to happen. And so why not just try to make sure that you and your neighbor feel safe and protected, and you do the best you can. But, to some extent, we do live kind of, like a serfdom, on the old, instead of kind of gardening for kings and queens, we're doing their spreadsheets and stuff. And so it's not that different. And so what if we all just kind of work together and band together and realize you're not really against the other serfs. The other serfs are all in it with you. But so yeah, that's my soapbox. I want to talk a little bit more about research findings about homelessness, unhoused people, wealth, inequality, and what the researchers have found. So we talked about how kids notice economic differences really early. Kids also interpret inequality through fairness, not through economics. So, no matter how you try to explain the complex system of money and investment and holding properties, kids don't care. Is it fair? That is the lens through which kids see things. I mean, look, I experience it on a very micro level all the time. Oh, my brother got to watch, screens for an hour and I didn't. Well, yeah, you were at soccer practice, it's not that, or, he got an extra helping of pasta and I didn't. Well, he asked for it. Did you want, everything is about fairness. So remember, kids interpret inequality through this lens of fairness. Silence increases anxiety and stigma with this topic and most topics with kids. So you don't want to be silent about addressing these things. Talking about homelessness actually reduces fear in kids and increases their empathy. Kids do better when parents give simple, honest explanations. Don't overthink it. Just go with your gut. Keep it simple, silly. Remember that? KISS, Kiss. Keep it simple, smarty, stupid. It's a kind of a Rorschach test. You didn't learn that? It was like the KISS method. Keep it simple.
Makes sense. I thought it's the economy.
Yeah,
Whatever.
well,
Ain't
there's that too.
horrible.
Exposure to helping behaviors builds agency, not guilt. So yeah, you want to teach your kids how to be a good person, how to help. So that's kind of what the research says. Are you ready for this toolkit, this A through H toolkit, Ollie?
Oh yeah, and I can tell you right now, so much of this is probably one of the more divisive toolkits you'll ever get, because some people will be like, oh, right, let's be honest, there's plenty of people in America and the world that can be like, I don't care, that's not my problem, I got my own problems, me. And I would just say this for the people who do wonder, who think it's difficult, is a problem, have some idea of empathy. It is, I'll use the analogy of like when I was in college and I was handing out that money to one single person. You can do that. You can pull up on the street, someone says, oh, can I have something? You have some change? Whatever. It's just change in your car. Who cares? If it's not a big deal to you, it might be a big deal to them. There's that. And two is like the ways you can kind of help with time. And this is where I completely credit the world's greatest mom, really, because a few times, usually during Thanksgiving, when we don't really have plans because it's just the three of us and always feels silly to even make anything besides a roast chicken, but to make it special, we will, and it's actually amazing because as much as we're like, oh, people are greedy and selfish and buying $12 million apartments, even if they were BoJack Horseman. But on Thanksgiving, a few times, we will go and volunteer at like a shelter to hand out food. And it's actually a really wonderful thing too. You grab all the Thanksgiving meals, somebody's like prepped them, and there's actually a big line. It's like difficult. It's hard to volunteer for this. Obviously, it's Thanksgiving. People are hungry 365 days out of the year. But it's a really, I will say this, it really makes giving up more special to a degree. Heath still ate in 5 seconds and was like, "Can I go upstairs and play games?" So you know what I mean. It didn't. I'm not going to say it's amazing, but as a family, it's such a nice thing to do. So you just think about like how you can engage with the community. Okay, now let's hit it with the toolkit. Anyone who's interested in that story will be interested in the toolkit. So there you go.
Absolutely. So here's your toolkit, Ollie, for how to talk to your kids about homelessness, poverty, and inequality. Tool A, ask before you interpret. So you want to start, as always, with questions, with curiosity, not
Every time.
conclusions.
Every time.
Almost every time. A parent will say to your kid, so what did you notice? What made you curious about that? What did you see that made you wonder why that person was asking for money? You want to keep your voice calm and neutral. You want to let a child describe the moment, the experience, the situation that they were in their own words. Don't fill in blanks for them. Avoid saying things like, well, this is why they're homeless, and, this is maybe what happened to them. You don't want to give premature explanations. You want to ask your kids what they think first. So this protects the child's narrative also from being overwritten by our assumptions, right? We talked a lot about unlearning. And part of how you do that is you don't pass down your learnings, and which is hard. We think, oh, we're parents, we have to teach them everything we know. Well, part of it is allowing them to learn on their own. So tool A, ask questions before interpreting. Tool B, validate the feeling. Always validate the feeling. You want to lower the volume, lower the emotional intensity so the child can think. It could be really scary to see someone panhandling on the street. It could be really scary to see someone sleeping on a park bench. And so you just want to acknowledge that fear, not give a value judgment on it. And just say, yeah, that was confusing. That must have scared you. Or, it makes sense you have questions. Seeing someone without a home can feel sad. It can be confusing. It can feel strange. So just validate whatever it is they're feeling. There is no wrong emotion to feel when you're confronted with that because it's not normal. We have normalized it, but it is not normal to see someone living without a roof over their head. You want to mirror your kid's tone, right? So, you want to make sure that they feel like you aren't judging them and just name the emotion. So don't tell your kids, don't be dismissive. Don't say, oh, you don't have to worry about that, or, not a big deal. That makes kids feel unheard, unseen. Validate. Be there, sit with it, allow them to know that whatever they're feeling is being heard by you. Tool B, validate the feeling. Tool C, separate identity from circumstance. This helps prevent shame-based thinking. The parent can say things like, they don't have a home right now. They're a person who might be going through something really hard. And you want to make sure your kid knows that not having money doesn't tell us who a person is. That is not the arbiter of your worth, and a parent should make sure to use person first language and emphasize that these are temporary circumstances. This person likely had a home before and may have a home again. And they are currently in a situation, not an identity. So separate the identity from circumstance. That's tool C. Tool D, normalize the feeling without dismissing it. Again, you want to reduce fear in your kids without minimizing suffering. So, normalize this situation, right? Because it's a reality. Normalize the reality without dismissing it. Excuse me, tool D. A lot of family struggle sometimes is what a parent could say. You could say, different people have different resources, and you make sure your kid knows you're not wrong to notice this. It's important that you notice this. Again, keep explanations simple. Ground the conversation in reality. Avoid, again, saying things like, oh, it's no big deal, or it doesn't happen that much, or it doesn't happen around here, because that's just, going la 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 la. We're trying to talk about facing this in a real, honest, helpful way. So you want to make sure your kids feel safe asking questions without feeling guilty for even noticing the inequality. It's a good thing. You want to be able to notice this. This is reality. Tool E, teach skills explicitly. You want to give kids concrete ways to respond. So a parent can say something like, if you're curious, you can ask me quietly, if we pass someone who's unhoused, and we can talk about it. When you see someone who needs help, we can brainstorm together what we can do about it. You want to say, here's how you can show someone respect who might be struggling. You always want to model respectful language, but it's okay to practice these scripts with your child. I think a lot of times people think like it's got to be I have to be parenting in the moment. Like, so often you have to say things over and over and over. It's very rare, life is not a movie where there's one profound thing that is said one time that really sticks with you. Oftentimes things are said over and over and over, and that's why they stick with you, right? That's just the reality, and that's your job as a parent. You gotta say things more than once. So tool E, teach skills explicitly. Say them out loud. Tool F, practice how we respond to need. Help kids rehearse through your own actions. You can practice together as a family what you do in those moments. Offer 2 to 3 concrete options that fit your values. You can say to each other, I hope they get what they need. You can ask yourselves, is there a way we can help today as a family? And then, like you were saying, Ollie, find the places in your community where you can physically contribute, where you can support people who need food, need housing. And you just want to both practice and execute those ways of giving back. Tool G, check in with your kids about their safety, their guilt, their worry. You don't want your kids to be obsessing over this either, right? It's important to notice, but they also have to focus on their own lives and realities. And so if you find your kids fixating on a topic like this, it's okay to say, have you been thinking a lot about people without a home lately? And how does that make you feel? Does it make you feel scared about our home? Does it make you feel scared about money? Do you feel bad that when people have things that we don't? Do you feel bad when people, when we have things that other people don't, or that certain people have that we don't, right? Just get into all of it, because it speaks to the whole thing about the class issue that we were talking about before. You want to, as a parent, listen for safety fears. That's the oh my God, what if we are unhoused? You want to listen for guilt, where your kid says it's just not fair that we have this and they don't. And you want to listen for this hopelessness that we were talking about of well, it's never going to change, because it won't ever change with that attitude. And it can feel like we're really small and we can't have an impact, but we are here for but a short time, and, let's do what we can, right? So as a parent, you want to make sure that kids feel not all powerful, but that what they do doesn't have an impact. There is this I don't want to say trickle down effect, but what you do, other people see and can influence other people. And you may not even ever know that a good act will make someone else do a good act. But I do believe that, when you're honking at someone in traffic, someone else will then honk, and then and vice versa. You let someone in, they might feel like they want to let someone in the lane too. So not always, but do the right thing. And that's tool G. Check in with your kid about their safety, guilt, and worry over time. Tool H. Tie our privilege to responsibility, not superiority. So you want to tell your kids, in our family, you're safe. You don't have to earn your belonging. But we also believe that when we have enough, we look for ways to care about the people who don't. And having more doesn't make us better. It just gives us more chances to be kind and give to others. So, you can name a few different concrete ways to do this. You give your money to organizations with that help people with housing or food. You can give your time. And again, you always want to talk respectfully about the people who are struggling. They are human beings just like us. It's our responsibility to help those with less. It is a privilege to do so. It doesn't make us better than them. You want to make sure your kid knows that. And that's tool H. Thoughts?
Question for you. Because a lot of this is, I think, so much predicated on like a concern that stems from your kids. You know what I mean? That they're disturbed by something they see or interact with. And I guess my question is, and this is essentially how I grew up, and to a degree, how we've kind of repositioned us moving to Austin, right? We lived in downtown LA. No shortage of seeing homeless people there, right? We felt compelled to leave. And it wasn't just because of homeless people, but that was a definite part of the environment of why it wasn't a great environment, you know? Do your kids like how often do they interact with this? Are they bothered by it? Because we don't really see it. We're comfortably protected, you know. So a lot of these concerns will happen like only in certain circumstances, right? So I guess I am just kind of curious, especially given your kid's age. It seems real and where you live that this
Hmm.
seems very prime stuff for your world.
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, we live in North Brooklyn, in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. There is a shelter, a kind of an in-between shelter, just a number of blocks away. And I will tell you that there has been an increase in, folks who are, I guess you'd call it loitering, vagrancy, and it's been very troubling to a lot of the adults in our community, which has been kind of fascinating for me because we're a progressive community, I think politically, theoretically. And it you do find a lot of that NIMBY, not in my backyard attitude start to crop up
Hmm.
when all of a sudden there are people I think you find a little bit more drug paraphernalia at the park. There's people, not a ton, but yeah, some panhandling going on. People are just kind of like perhaps suffering from withdrawal or, mental illnesses that are kind of like wandering around. You know, it's been brought up to our local elected officials, and I think the response has generally been, look, people need housing. There are checks and balances to get into a facility like this. You have to be clean, you have to be on a path, no criminal record. I don't know how often that is with 100% accuracy, maintained, but I think like the truth is we live in New York City and we live in a city, and I think part of the beauty of that is there is a diversity of experience of, people coming from all different places. And I think like if we're going to pretend that we care about these rights for all people, and then there is an opportunity to put a shelter in a community, you got to kind of put your money where your mouth is. And it's not a perfect thing. I think part of it is, yeah, people don't want to see it. I know a lot of people move to the suburbs because they, yeah, they want the space and the good schools, which is really just code for white schools. But they just don't want to see it, and I think that's the reality. Like, I wish we could see less of it because there were less people who didn't need social services and support. But, and I'm not even talking about like unhoused people. These are people who are in shelter currently, like on their way, hopefully, to temporary interim housing on their own. But so, yeah, I mean, it's my kids will bring it up. I'm kind of learning in real time, like I think this kit is just as much for me as it is for any listener. So, and I think that's an important thing to note for this big question series and just our show in general is, we are not experts. We are just dads who care, who, dare I say, give a shit about giving our children, a richer experience maybe than we had, because the whole idea is to do better every generation, appreciate what you learned from your own dads and parents, but also the stuff that maybe they didn't teach you and the stuff that you're now having to learn as an adult. And the idea is if we can all kind of help each other, man, maybe our kids will be even better and then their kids even better than that. And we can just create like this better society where we never fully live up to the dream, like in 1776, but we can get pretty dang close. Huh? How's that?
I mean,
That to end on a hopeful note.
to me, like so much of this comes to a fundamental question is that how do we still have this problem? Why do we have to like talk to our kids about this? Like, why is this something that's like, oh no, let me explain this to you? Because we try so hard to sweep it under the rug. And PS too, for some people out there who might be like, oh, whatever, you're a socialist, go to move to another country. It is quite shocking when I've gone to Japan, which I throw lavish praise on. What's weird is in a city the size of Tokyo, you're like, where are all the homeless people? Because I don't think they solved that either.
Yeah,
So I think this is actually a global issue. How about that?
sure.
There is something fundamental. I think really we can ask ourselves this as dads, and why we can maybe ask ourselves what is the bigger picture here and why we can maybe address values is because it seems like for a long time, consistently too, we're brought up thinking that someone's value is based on their money. And I think to me, it's like I want to raise my kid to value people beyond money. So that's my big takeaway there. Is that someone's worth is far more complex than whatever money they have in their bank
Sure.
account.
Sure. Hey, let's do the age by age guidance really quick, and then we can
Yes.
wrap this out. So, we're going to go really quickly through what to tell your kids, depending on their age range, about poverty, inequality, homelessness. So, when your kids are aged 3 to 5, this is when they're in the concrete, immediate physical body based reaction stage. Your child might be thinking, why is that person outside?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, are we safe? These are literal questions, the most basic low hanging fruit questions. As a parent, you can say, again, they don't have a home right now. You can remind your children that we're safe and we can care about them because they're our neighbors, they're our fellow community members. You can tell your kids that some people need extra help, but at this age, you want to avoid long explanations. Keep it simple for really young kids, right? Ages 6 to 9, this is when we're getting into that territory where kids are kind of obsessed with fairness, with rules, trying to kind of discover the point of certain things, meaning making. And a child might be thinking, well, not just why aren't they in a home, but how does this happen? Is this their fault? And as a parent, you can say, people have different resources for lots of different reasons. It's not about good or bad. It's a bit more complicated than that. Remind your kids when they're this age, 6 to 9, being curious is okay. Avoid blaming that person for their own circumstances. Parents can say, some families have more money, some have less. It's not because someone's good or bad, it's because of things that happened in their life. If you want, we can talk about ways to help. Leave it at that. A little bit older, ages 10 to 12, starts to become a little bit more about identity, comparison, justice seeking, and the child might be thinking, well, that's not fair. And can that happen to us? And, parent, you want to remind your kids it's okay to feel upset about this. Inequality is unfair. That is the definition. Remind your kids they're safe. We still care deeply about our neighbors. But let's talk about what is in our control, right? You don't want to go the toxic positivity route of, oh, well, everything will end up all right. It might not. So just acknowledge, yeah, this is unfair. Makes sense you feel that way. But let's talk about fairness. And, let's think about different ways that we can aid our neighbors, our community members. Teenagers might get a little bit more existential. Think about, it's all kind of a version of each other, but it's just getting to a higher level. So a teen might be thinking like, why is the world like this? Like you were saying, Ollie, this is a global problem. What is wrong with our society? Why do we exist in this broken world? And that's a big question. And so parents, you can just say, that's a big question. Thank you for asking that. I don't have all the answers. I can't fix it all, but let's try to figure it out together. Don't lecture your kids. They're smarter than that. Don't try to tie it all up in a bow. I think so often we feel that we need to solve things, fix things, have the answer, an answer. Say, I don't know, but I want to explore that with you, and let's keep talking about this. Keep the conversation going. Tell your kid, you're asking important questions. Inequality is real. It's complicated. We are not going to be able to solve everything, but you also can choose what kind of person you want to be in the face of this reality. And I'm here to talk you through it. I'm here to be your, in your sidecar on your Vespa towards justice.
You brought up Vespa. I feel like you've been bringing up Vespa a lot lately. Maybe I heard it on your
Let's go to
site.
a word from our sponsor, Vespa.
Man, when you gotta get somewhere fast. Vespa. Yeah. It
Such a
just
good
rolls
name.
up. Vespa. Vespa.
Ollie, you want to close it out? Any final thoughts? Be our Jerry Springer here.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Legend. R.I.P. Met the man once. Met the man once. Met the man once. At a wax museum next to his own statue. More on that on a future episode. I would say, generally speaking, a really great opportunity, and it should happen far more than the holidays, but it's when people do it, and it is what it is, and it's a start. But a great time to give back is during the holidays. That's when people seem to remember that they can be kind. That's a good start. Maybe we can be kind 365 days out of the year, but I think it's a great family activity to engage with the idea of, homelessness and poverty and those less fortunate, and then in some sort of organized charitable fashion. All it takes is a little afternoon. They do all the logistics for you. But yeah, that's definitely something that I've really enjoyed the last few years. Is it's an amazing feeling. You just go to someone's home, you deliver them food, and you know what too. I'll even say it because some people will be like, "Oh, I don't know, do they really deserve it?" There are times where you deliver food and you're like, "You're cooking right now." I mean, it's great, enjoy, but it's just a nice thing to do. You think about all the things we do, we spend our time. What do? We make money or spend money. We make money or spend money. That's it. This is something where you're just doing, you're giving, you're being a human being without, money being the main driver, except for maybe your gas and time. I think it's a really, really, it's something that I didn't grow up doing, and I'm very grateful to be doing with my own family. Highly recommend it.
All right. Well, take care of yourselves and each other.
And deliver turkey meals, even if it looks like they're got a turkey in the oven. True story. True story.